Welcome in to Palmetto Sports Daily, everybody. On this fine Monday, Caroline here, joined by Summer and Julia. We've got one of the biggest football games in the state to talk about this weekend, the Palmetto Bowl that went down in Columbia at Williams-Brice on Saturday afternoon, little noon window. Got a day game for that game. And guys, this is the fifth straight season that the road team has won in this, or the sixth straight season, I should say, that the road team has won in this rivalry. Clemson beating South Carolina 28-14. That streak goes all the way back to 2019. So doing a little bit of alternating with both of these groups here. And Clemson's defense really was one of the stories in this game. I know they put up 28 points offensively, but the defense had 4 takeaways of South Carolina. It was an early fumble followed by 3 second-half turnovers, a pick six, an interception, and another fumble. So a lot of big stuff going on there. They also had 5 sacks of Lenora Sellers, only allowed him to get 2 rushing yards. If you guys remember back to last season, that was one of the biggest storylines of that Palmetto Bowl, was what Lenora Sellers was able to do with his legs in that game. So lot of different storylines to play into here. One of the big ones coming out of this one is that Clemson is now 7-5 on the season, so they've won four straight games to be at that point, including the Palmetto Bowl. The first team in Clemson history to get to that 7-win mark after starting the year 1-3. So head coach Dabo Swinney had some thoughts about that after the game, and Cade Klubnik had some thoughts about his legacy as Clemson's quarterback and what that means in terms of his record in the Palmetto Bowl as well.
That wasn't what we set out for our story to be, but that's our story. And that's what life's all about. It's, when good things happen to you, how do you respond? And when bad things happen to you, how do you respond? And, man, you saw a group of young people that have responded to a lot of adversity, a lot of disappointment, a lot of negativity, a lot of that stuff. They've stayed together. They've continued to believe.
30, 40 years from now, nobody's going to remember my record as a starting quarterback. They remember, hey, what kind of person was that? And so I think about that, and I think about that in the type of legacy I want to have. But it is pretty great to be a 2-1 versus these guys as a starter. So.
Cade more worried about his legacy there as a person rather than his record, although yes, like he said, he is 2-1 against the Gamecocks as a starting quarterback. So guys, I'm just curious about your thoughts in a game where Clemson's defense really showed up. Ricardo Jones had 2 turnovers himself, and the time of possession was an interesting one as well. Clemson dominating the clock. Julia, what did you see from Clemson, and what did you not see from the Gamecocks in this game?
Yeah, that kind of leads into all the points that I have, because going up to Clemson last week and hearing what the defensive players had to say, talking about last year and how influential that was for their preparations for this game, they did not want Lenora Sellers to be productive at all, and they accomplished their goal. He did not look like how he did back in 2024. He looked completely different, could not get things done. So Clemson defense getting the job done there. I want to hit on a couple of points, my kind of biggest takeaways from South Carolina's side of things. You mentioned time of possession. That ultimately ended up being almost 39 minutes for Clemson to South Carolina's 21. And there was a tweet by Sports Information Director Ross Taylor out of Clemson that Clemson has never trailed against South Carolina in those last 6 victories here in Columbia. So really interesting note there that almost if you control the time of possession, you will win this game. What the stats are showing you here. But looking at the other things, turnovers, you look at the turnover margin, 4-1. South Carolina giving up 4 turnovers. You're not going to win a game giving up 4 turnovers. That was 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles. And then the biggest thing for me is noticing throughout the game, the run game just could not get going whatsoever. I believe I looked up at the signage around the stadium midway through the third quarter, and I want to say that South Carolina was sitting at something like -5 net yards at that point, and then they finally got back into plus territory and ultimately finished the game with 41 yards on the ground. So that's something that wasn't working. A lot of their total yardage ended up being through the air. They were moving that a little bit better, but Clemson put a defensive plan together, and what they wanted it to look like is what they got, and they were able to, kind of manage South Carolina through that entire game, and that's what you want to look at moving forward. I know we'll talk about what's in the future for all these teams a little bit later on in the show, but you need to solve that kind of offensive problem for South Carolina, because you can't have a game like that where you stall out in the second half. I mean, that's looking back towards the Texas A&M game where you come out, you have that good first half of offensively, you really get the ball moving, and you got to keep that going, and then you have that second half where everything kind of just falls to the wayside. So that's something that they definitely need to investigate, but kind of a disappointing showing out of the Gamecocks. Of course, that's not just from our side of things. The players and the coaches were obviously very disappointed as well. But Summer, you were here in Columbia with me. Just what were some of your takeaways from this game?
Yeah, Julia, I think everything you guys mentioned. I mean, props to Clemson for going in there and winning. I mean, we were there. It was a good atmosphere. I mean, it wasn't completely full as the game started, but after a few minutes, a typical noon game, right, fans all trickled in, and it was packed full in there. So to come in there, a hostile environment. I mean, Dabo Swinney even said it after the game. He said it's hard to win here at Williams-Brice, and yet they've done it, like we said, 6 straight years the away team has won in this rivalry. So I don't know if there's something to that, just there's less pressure being the road team in terms of what you're dealing with on the way there, not all the home chaos. I don't know what it is, but it'll be interesting to see if that keeps on going. But yeah, for this South Carolina team, I believe it's been 9 games this season that they've entered the fourth quarter, and it was a 1-score game. Yeah, they just weren't able to finish in this one. Clemson outscoring them 8-0 there in the fourth quarter. In South Carolina, like you said, it's not us, our opinion, really saying disappointing. I mean, they went 4-8 this season, and this was a team that was ranked heading into this season. People had them as playoff contenders, as, they said Lenora Sellers was a Heisman contender, and you can say the same for Cade Klubnik, too. But I think this game, with nothing really big riding on the line, I mean, Clemson had already clinched a bowl game. South Carolina wasn't getting one regardless. It was really just bragging rights. So I think for this team to once again kind of fall flat there in the fourth quarter, and it just kind of snowballed there as we saw it unfold there with 2 interceptions. It was just kind of the story of the season for the Gamecocks, but definitely, a head scratcher for a lot of fans and people, even among that team, saying, why can't they finish these games? So I think that'll be a big focus for them this season. But, I mean, Dabo Swinney even said it, his defense, he thought, was the story of the game, and rightfully so. I mean, they took over there and played well. And, I mean, Cade Klubnik leading this team in the second half there, too. So props to Clemson. Obviously, they get those bragging rights there. But, yeah, it leaves a lot of questions for the future of both of these quarterbacks, including Lenora Sellers. I know we heard him, he wasn't the most promising after the game, so there's been lots of speculation. We'll get to all that after this break.
Yeah, that's straight. I mean, when the decisions come to make a decision, when the time comes to make a decision, I make a decision, whatever's best for me.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. One of 2 big questions here in Columbia as we head into the offseason for the Gamecocks. Will Lenora Sellers be at South Carolina next year? That was him answering that question directly. Someone asked him, Lenoris, will you be at South Carolina next year? He kind of chuckled a little bit, said that was a straight question, but he said when the time comes, he'll make the best decision for him. And, I think there's got to be a lot hinging on this, because obviously this wasn't the season that he necessarily wanted. This isn't the season that his whole team or the staff wanted. And I think there's a lot to look at in terms of his numbers of whether or not he thinks he can, bounce back and have a better year next season as a Gamecock, or if he wants to go somewhere else. I know he is eligible to declare for the NFL draft as well. So a lot of things to consider for Lenoris, but here, I think it hinges completely on the second question out of Columbia, and that's who is going to be the next offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And, there's a lot of names floating around. This is something that Shane Beamer really wants to work on pretty quickly. He said so over the last couple of weeks. And this is something he wants to have in place. He didn't talk too much about these things moving forward after the game on Saturday. He mostly wanted to focus on the game itself and said there would be time in the future to talk about these things. Obviously, you have early signing day coming up this week. The period opens on Wednesday, so you'll start to see some of your class of 2026 trickle in and sign to be a part of the Gamecocks this upcoming year. So Gotta wonder how quickly that Beamer wants to move with this hire. And there's been a lot of names floating around, kind of most prominently John David Baker out of East Carolina. Buster Faulkner from Georgia Tech, Kevin Decker out of ODU, and then there's a whole number of other OC names. But guys, I just want to kind of open this up here. What kind of hire needs to be made here at South Carolina to, one, get people to have confidence in this offense again, but two, get Lenore Sellers to stay here at South Carolina?
Yeah, Julia, I'll be honest, this is complete speculation, but the way Lenore answered that question, I got the vibe that his mind was already kind of made up, but I could be completely wrong. And you know, like you said, I think it does completely hinge on who the offensive coordinator is going to be, but you would think if he was really committed to the program, he would have said, hey, I'm committed to this program regardless. But, hey, you know, maybe you know, an up-and-coming offensive coordinator could change things. I think a guy like John David Baker is very young and upcoming, and a lot of quarterbacks would want to play for him. He doesn't have, you know, he has some SEC experience, but not the huge kind of repertoire there. But, yeah, I don't know. And I know people have thrown around different teams. You know, Lenore's could go to Miami. You see what he's done with Carson Beck there. You don't know if that's even been offered to him, but you got to think he's entertaining all of that. But, yeah, if I'm Shane Beamer, I'm going to want to hire an offensive coordinator pretty quick here. And I know some other guys are dealing with bowl games and stuff, but unless you're going with, you know, a Lane Kiffin type situation, I think these guys could go ahead and come here. A lot of who they're looking at as an offensive coordinator aren't in these college football playoff positions, so it shouldn't be that complicated. I know another name mentioned was the Pitt OC. I believe it's Cade Bell, who's son of Kerwin Bell, so obviously his dad was an established quarterback at Florida and has done wonders at Western Carolina. And I do think Beamer is all about those kind of connections, so I wouldn't be surprised with that when he's big on his family connections and ties, and he's probably tied in with all of these guys. But yeah, I would like to see a younger guy come in here, you know, and work with Lenore, but it would be interesting to see what they bring. I know John David Baker would be more of an air raid guy, so it kind of obviously hinges on what Lenore is going to want to do there. But also, you got to think if they're considering these OCs as pertaining to who the other backup quarterbacks are there, or who they're thinking they're going to get, if Beamer's even considering Lenore. So, going to be interesting to see how this unfolds soon here, but I expect something to happen fairly quick. I know fans are going to be riding it too. Caroline, what have you seen, and kind of what are you expecting out of this whole situation?
Yeah, Summer, I mean, to your point, I think the quicker a decision is made in this situation, the better for everybody involved at South Carolina, Lenore Sellers included, right? And being a guy who, you know, was maybe a Heisman candidate before this year, kind of part of those conversations, and then not having a great season, right? Like, I think in order for him to want to stay there, back to what Julia was talking about a few minutes ago, is they're going to need to bring in somebody that's going to play to his strengths, right? I mean, he did a lot of scrambling around this season, but mostly to avoid getting sacked, right? I mean, it wasn't really him being able to be in a situation where he was gaining positive yardage in a lot of those moments. It was to avoid being mauled by a defense. There were changes that happened on the offensive line to kind of help that situation, give him some more protection. And when Lenore Sellers has protection, I mean, he can do a whole manner of things. So I think them bringing in somebody that's going to play to his strengths, I think that's going to be important. So a lot on the table for South Carolina in terms of what's next, a lot of things that are going to happen over the off season. Also a lot of things in terms of what's next for Clemson, who is still playing on in the postseason, not quite the off season for the Tigers yet. We do have some bowl projections here for Clemson, like we mentioned a little bit ago, sitting at 7-5. They were bowl eligible a couple weeks ago after getting that win over Furman. So now we do have some potential spots of where they could play. I'll just go down the list, which is kind of a culmination of, you know, ESPN's projections, CBS's projections, and a whole bunch of other publications. But we've got the Fenway Bowl against Army. We've got the Sun Bowl against Arizona State in there. We've got the Gasparilla Bowl against South Florida. The Duke's Mayo Bowl against Mizzou, so that wouldn't be too far of a trip up in Charlotte. We've got the Pinstripe Bowl against Illinois, and the Pop-Tarts Bowl, always a fun one of my personal favorites, against Arizona. Quarterback Cade Klubnik, it's a question of whether the senior is going to play, as a lot of these guys who are older tend to make decisions of playing in a bowl based on their NFL hopes and what they plan to do in, declaring for the draft and all of that. But Klubnik did say earlier in the week that he's a football player and he wants to play in this game and compete. And knowing kind of what he said about his legacy there after the Palmetto Bowl, like, it would be surprising to me if he didn't want to put that Clemson uniform on one more time for those Clemson fans and go out there with head coach Dabo Swinney. But Julia, your thoughts on where Clemson could end up and if we'll see Cade Klubnik sometime in December?
That's the thing is, you get that 7th win. You had Dabo talking about, the difference between 6 versus 7 wins earlier in the week. I'm not going to get into that whole meme thing, but
no,
so you thought that would offer a little bit more clarity here on if, they would get a cold weather or warm weather bowl, but they're still kind of sitting somewhere in between of they could kind of end up anywhere. It would be great to see them go somewhere warm for all of us that need to go follow the game to wherever they go. But I'm kind of stuck out on where they're going to be. But I will say I do think Cade will 100% play in this game. That's just kind of the character that I've observed from him over the last few years, and even him saying it. Yeah. I think something drastic would have to happen for him to not play in this game. I think this is something that means a lot to him, and that it would take away from his experience personally if he did not finish out this final game with Clemson. But we got plenty more football talk coming up on the other side of the break. Hirings, firings, all of it. We'll talk about it coming up.
Welcome back in here to Palmetto Sports Daily. We mentioned it was a wild weekend for college football coach hirings and firings, and one of those, Coastal Carolina, announcing yesterday they are parting ways with head coach Tim Beck. That's after 3 seasons of Beck leading the Chanticleers. He went 20-18 as head coach at Coastal. Now, he followed Jamie Chadwell, who left Coastal after a pretty historic run there. He went to Liberty, so Beck would take over there and just kind of not the whole, he didn't really maintain what Chadwell had kept going there. So that's what Coastal Athletic Director Chance Miller said. He said they were grateful for Beck and his efforts over the 3 seasons, but, we're looking for, he said actually in his release that they wanted a coach that was going to lead this program to win the Sun Belt and compete for a spot in a college football playoff. So high expectations there for sure. But I think for Beck, the Coastal went 6-6 this season and finished 3rd, I believe, in the Sun Belt there. But I will say, they brought in Samari Collier midway through this season, who really brought a spark to this Coastal offense, and then he went out hurt a few games ago. So I would have been interested to see how Coastal would have finished if Collier would have been able to finish this season. But I think after a 59-10 loss to James Madison in their final game, that was definitely the nail in the coffin for this team. And their defensive coordinator will serve as the interim head coach for the bowl game because Coastal is still bowl eligible. But it'll be interesting to see where they go next. And Coastal Carolina on the search for a new head coach. Julia Westerman, what's your assessment of what's going on there?
I think the first name you got to look at here, Chennis Berry, South Carolina State. I mean, you've seen what he's been able to do in the state of South Carolina. He knows this state. He's recruited at Benedict College. He's now recruited at South Carolina State. He's been successful at both. He was just named the MEAC Coach of the Year again. Interview him, see what he can do. I mean, it's only a matter of time until Coach Berry makes the next step into a bigger institution. So I think that should be one of the names you look at. I'd even say Shane Beamer should look at Chennis Berry for the OC job. I don't think that's too crazy to put out there. So give Chennis Berry some interviews. You've seen what he can do over the past 4 or 5 years. Why not see what he can do there? But hey, not the craziest of the hirings and firings this weekend. Of course, guys, we got to talk about it. Lane Kiffin, he drug it out for a long time, but Kiffin is on his way to LSU. We were kind of all standing by. We were watching Marty Smith put the hours in for ESPN in Oxford throughout the whole weekend. But guys, just what's your takeaway from this very odd, very drawn-out saga? Caroline, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's just It's hard to even kind of put the thoughts into words about it because it's just so much drama, I mean, it's like just so drug out. And honestly, like I I feel for the Ole Miss players who have been part of this group that's putting together the best campaign in Ole Miss football history, which is a long-standing history. You know, I mean, they've come this far. They're 11-1 under Lane Kiffin, and then it's like the rug gets pulled out from under them. Their head coach is leaving, and they have a legitimate chance at winning the trophy, you know, in January. I mean, they really do. They are all but having a spot in the college football playoff. I mean, they have a legitimate chance to go out and win this thing, and they're going to, if they want to do it, they're going to have to do so without a head coach. And I just, you know, if that's what Lane Kiffin wanted to do and he would have had regrets about it and needed to go to LSU, next step in his career, like, that's great. I just think it could have been done in a lot cleaner manner, and a lot less people maybe would have been infuriated and hurt by it and all the things. But Summer, what are you thinking about it? I mean, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I mean, of course it's chaos, but then again, it's Lane Kiffin. He never leaves anywhere without a little bit of drama. So, I think Ole Miss knew what they were doing. When you hire Lane Kiffin, you know it's going to come with the drama, whether it's the takes he says throughout the season and then eventually when he's going to leave here. And I will kind of play devil's advocate that yes, Lane could have handled this better. But if what he has said about their athletic director is true, you know what? It's kind of on their AD too, because he gave him this ultimatum, and then he said, if this is true, Kiffin said, the AD said, if you're leaving, you can't coach us in the playoff. Well, then your AD's kind of taking pride over what's best for your team, if I'm being honest there. Because, yes, I get it. LSU is one of Ole Miss rivals. So, yeah, it's kind of an awkward situation. But if you really want to give your players the best chance to finish in the college football playoff, I mean, why not let them stay there and finish it out? I know there's probably way more drama to that, but I think, you know, there's two sides to every story, and it'll be interesting to see what else goes on here and what assistants stay or go with him. We've got more to come here on Palmetto Sports Daily, including the Carolina Panthers with some new energy this weekend. We'll talk about that after the break.
Welcome back into Palmetto Sports Daily. Real quickly before we go, the Carolina Panthers sitting at 7-6 on the year after beating the NFC's top team, the LA Rams, 31-28. It was an absolute thriller. Panthers have 7 wins for the first time since 2022. We've got tons of great player reactions in the locker room that we'll expand on a little bit tomorrow. So we hope you guys join us tomorrow. But for now, from all of us, have a great Monday.